Hello, and you're very welcome to another edition of the JMac Podcast. Of course, guys, this podcast is sponsored by OrgaRetro.com. Check the website for all your retro gear needs and wants. And today, I'm joined by a good pal of mine, Danny Hughes. And the last time I was talking to this man, he was giving me abuse about United. So, Danny.
Yeah. Hasn't worked out well for Liverpool or United, I don't think. So, yeah, interesting times.
Yeah, geez, you can say that again, Danny boy. And sure, we're in regular enough contact. But I suppose, how are you finding the last couple of months? I suppose there's a bit of it's a bit of good news that the North can go back to training now in a couple of weeks, and it's a bit of something to aim towards. But there's not much clarification up here in the south, unfortunately. I think maybe in mid-April, but people are still a bit peed off. But how are you finding the last couple of months and year, Danny?
I would be telling a lie if I didn't say that it's been tough. Now, listen, I know in the grand scheme of things, they're first world problems. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are going through COVID, in the midst of COVID, that have long COVID. There's a lot of people there that a lot of families that are struggling, that people that are homeless, people needing food banks. I'm very conscious of the fact that there's a lot of people out there that suffer. A lot of, I suppose indirectly, you have a lot of people out there that are concerned about their own health. Just outside of COVID, when we look at how many people that are going to be diagnosed with cancer over the next few years, and what the implications of that are going to be with regards to the health service. And I just feel it has been very, very difficult in this lockdown because it's lasted so long, because I think everybody is just sick to their teeth of it. I think, the government in Stormont and Dublin and London to a certain degree just have, just one crisis to the next, and added into that Brexit and the concerns in the north. I think it's just been a very, very difficult time. I suppose, like most people, I have a young family, and this particular lockdown the last one since January has been tough. And I suppose from my perspective, I'm very much, I hate the winter. I really do. I think I suffer from that seasonal adjustment disorder, and the dark nights and stuff like that. I just find them incredibly difficult. And the bright evenings coming in, and the warmer weather. There's a bit of hope there, and obviously getting back onto the field again provides you with another wee bit of hope that the training can start and we can have that outlet with the local clubs. So there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel. But I think when we look at how we manage this, when we look at the people in power that have managed that, I think there have been serious inadequacies there, and I think there's a lot of people that are struggling far worse than me, obviously, but than a lot of us. But there are people struggling out there, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult, especially for young people.
Yeah, only if you're we're all in it, I suppose, and that's probably the general consensus. And I suppose, Danny, it's probably something we kind of brought into on the podcast. And I suppose we're locked away. There's no outlet. There's no pubs, restaurants, nightclubs, or nothing to really kind of go to. Not that me or you go to a nightclub anyway. We're very well mannered. But how important is it to kind of pick up the phone, Danny, and ring that teammate, colleague, friend, granddad, anyone at all, Danny, just to kind of keep the spirits high?
Yeah, and the challenge, I suppose, every morning when you get up is, right, well, you're going to run into scenarios where things are going to be tough. And it's how you approach that. Do you approach it with a positive mindset, or do you see it as, I can't wait to get through the day, to get the head down on the pillow again? And I suppose from my perspective, coming from a sporting background, from that high level sports performance, you have to go again all the time. But that can be tiring at times, but it can be tiring getting a job done, running a family, all the concerns, anxieties you would have for that. And I understand with you, with a young one now, it's not just about yourself, it's about, your kids, it's about your wife, it's about getting food on the table, paying the bills that are coming in. And I think that outlet that you need with sport, particularly if you get out for a jog, get out for a run, but you also need the interaction. I know I do. The change room, the football, the crack that comes along with it, I need that. And yes, while rarely in a pub or rarely out in Tesco's, you don't want to feel that you can't go out for a drink or go out for a meal, and it's the fact that you even can't go out for a cup of coffee and you can't sit in, or everything's closed. It's that restrictive element of it is difficult, because at the end of the day, we thrive in social scenarios. We thrive with interaction. Societies, communities, the happiest people in the world all thrive when there's a close-knit community and something that bonds them. And being able to have a chat and communicate is key. And, I suppose I know people from a psychology background, from a counselling background, and they have said to me, have intimated to me that, prior to COVID, they had, I suppose helped people through therapy and stuff like that. And they've now had the same people coming back 10 years later and saying, listen, it's been very difficult, I'm really struggling. And yes, sometimes we overblow and we overthink concerns and anxieties within our life, and that's a bit of a spiral. But that outlet of talking about it is fundamental. It is key to have the chat with your friend, with your brother, with your sister. And unfortunately, it's something that we haven't been doing enough during lockdown, is picking up the phone and chatting to somebody, because we've been isolated. And and I just think even opening up the economy to outside catering is going to be brilliant for us. And because we live in a country that the weather dictates a lot, again, that sort of adds to the general anxiety that's within society here. And I suppose there will be a bit of scouring in terms of our mental health and young people's mental health. But as I say, there's nothing we can do about the weather. It dictates a lot of what we do. I would contend that Spain, better areas of weather like America, California, they're probably coping a lot better because of the weather. It's certainly it's been challenging. I think there is a bit of an endemic element of society now that are struggling and are going to struggle, and I think the governments have missed that. They've missed that a wee bit, and it's okay. They're getting paid for their role, but I don't think politicians increasingly have any idea what it's like for frontline staff. You showed that in even the NHS 1% increase, that clapping for nurses in the north here and giving them one. It's a slap in the face. Like it's obviously the increases are better in the south, but still, like, I just I've become totally skeptical about politics and how it's been operated now since COVID. So I suppose I'm on a bit of a rant there, John, but that's, I suppose, for my scenario, the mental health challenges that have come out of COVID are going to be significant. There's going to be a bit of a legacy with it,
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. All well said, Danny, of course. And I suppose kind of how much is this all this kind of change your perspective as well, Danny? Because like I say to all my guests, like, it's changed people's mindset for the good, the better, and in some cases you were alluding to the worst as well, Danny. So has it changed your mindset a lot?
It has. I think it's highlighted how important Gaelic football is, how important it is to, how important the club is to me, how important the community is, how important those the hospitality sector is. I would think cafes, bars, restaurants, and how important they are in society. We have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol in our society, totally unhealthy. People that go out there and don't drink moderately, go out there just to get totally lashed. And it seems to be just something within our psyche that relationship probably isn't the most healthy. I think with COVID, we all need to reassess what's important in life. For me, it's obviously my family, my sport, my physical and mental health. Those are the most important things. And even with work, in how we work, traveling 2 hours and 2.5 hours on a commute to an office, is that the most productive use of employees' times when they can do that 2 or 3 days a week at home, and then still have that mix with going into the office when they need a wee bit of a break and a social aspect? So it has been fantastic in a lot of ways with how we're going to change how we work. Even from an environmental point of view, can we go to a space where CO2 emissions are significantly reduced because we don't have to travel to work as much as what we did. And I think even when you're talking about, look at our beauty spots and our mountain ranges, people are getting out and seeing the benefit and value in physically getting out and exercising. And if there is any positives out of COVID, it's the importance of interaction, it's the importance of the social, it's the importance of the hospitality sector to our economy, it's the importance of how we now want to work. And it might be a wake-up call for a lot of people to say, do you know what, I was too stressed, I work in a job that's too stressed, I don't want to commute anymore. And that can only be good for families, for society, for our communities. And again, the GA has become even itself like so intense, and so much money is thrown at it now. This COVID might check all of that. It has reset the button. It has reset even our calendar, where they were totally opposed to splitting the season, and now it's through. So there's a lot of positives have come out of such a terrible scenario. There's a lot of positives. So, you got to look at the positive side. If you dwell on the negative side of it, I think it'll drag you down. And it's about taking a positive outlook to it. And yes, you might have the blues, you might have a bad day, there might be a difficult scenario, but the solution to that is X, Y, and Z. And I suppose I've learned that the most. It's solving what you can solve, and everything outside of your control, you just got to let it go.
Yeah, absolutely. Control the controllables, I suppose, Danny. And I suppose we can touch on to the football end of things. You represented Down from 01 to 2014, 13 very good years, All-Ireland final in 2010. One All-Star picked up as well. And I suppose when you reflect on it, Danny, you made the breakthrough in 2001, elite panel of players that Down team was. And when you look back on it, what did you make of it all?
Oh, I loved it. I loved every minute playing county football. And indeed, when it wasn't there for me anymore from 2014, I really struggled. I really struggled to adapt to life without it. Yes, you had the soft air landing of going back to your club, but at that elite level, you're in the mindset of an athlete that you're gearing your life, your holidays, your daily preparations around training and match preparation. And we don't have it. I suppose I struggled with my identity and who I was, and I can imagine that for the more successful players, the more successful teams, possibly it can be difficult to adapt to a new way of living when you step away from county football. But for me, I just it was my everything. And I wasn't married, obviously, when I was still playing at county level, and possibly if I was married and had children at that time, it might have made the transition to, I suppose, to just being a fan and a club player easier. But it wasn't, and I felt that that was difficult. I found that my greatest challenge was that. And then I suppose I was very thankful for the many managers, coaches, and years that I had at county level. I was extremely grateful for that, and I suppose the one thing that I would say to John from my perspective is that it was a real roller coaster. It was brilliant. It was enjoyable. The crack was great. I had so many great friends. I made so many other friends and colleagues through railway cups and stuff like that, and I really had a ball. And I really enjoyed myself. So I have no regrets. I would do it all again. But I do have regrets in that I didn't enjoy it enough when I was in it. I was very, very serious, very intense, and possibly I should have sat back a wee bit more and smelled the roses. But then that wasn't the type of my personality. I was just that type of intense sort of person, and yeah, it was something I never ever felt comfortable in the down team or down panels, if that makes sense. I never felt that I was ever guaranteed a starting place, and every training session, every match, it nearly pushed me harder, and I pushed myself harder, probably to a point where I started to pick up at the end injuries that probably came against me a wee bit in the end, where you never really finish as you want to, and I was no different. I never really finished the way I wanted to finish, and but again, a lot of that was my own fault, because I pushed too hard in the end, and the body just broke down. But again, that's again one of my regrets, that I didn't. I suppose I didn't. Maybe I didn't believe in myself enough, and that might sound hard to believe, but I probably didn't get comfortable to the stage where you could say, right, I'm 10 years or 11 years out now. You need to relax, and if you're injured, you're injured. You don't need to hammer yourself. So I suppose it's a bit of a mixed bag, John, to be honest with you. But as I say, if I had to do it again, I would do it again. Probably would. And my only regret is that I didn't win more medals, win more team medals and individual awards. As everybody will tell you, winning individual awards is always a nice thing to do. And I think anybody who says it's not, then will be lying. But definitely as a team, it's just a pity we never won trophies.
Yeah. I suppose we can kind of touch on them early years as well, Danny, like seriously strong down teams over the years. And I was probably too young to remember, but I'm always hearing the likes of Mickey Lind and then James McCartan and just incredible players. And I'm pretty pity it wasn't. I probably wasn't even a thought when them boys were probably playing, Danny. But I suppose kind of looking at legends growing up, and like you always probably wanted to make the breakthrough. What was it like to watch some of them boys over the years, Danny?
Well, I suppose the 68 team and 60 and 61, 68 teams were iconic in that they had created a legacy there in the space of a decade that it was almost mythical, where the red and black, and the first team to go with tracksuits. It was said, well, that was true or not, I don't know, but they were the first ones to do away with the white shorts and wore red and black, and totally unique. And the brilliant players that they had, the Sean O'Neills, the Paddy Dohertys, the Joe Lennons, and the McCartans as well. It was, Down had a real history there. And then when 91, 94 came along, again you had guys that, that again in the space of 4 years created a dynasty there and a legacy there. And I recall 91, 94, the buzz around the county was unbelievable. It's the only thing that I ever wanted to do. That's truly the only thing that I ever wanted to do, was play for Down. And even school geared towards playing for Down. And I remember I grew up, and well, I didn't grow up, that was the point, but when I was coming up through underage teams, I was flying from a club, and our club wasn't a rural club. That wouldn't have been. I think we were operating in Division 3 for most of our time during the 90s. But underage level, we had a really good group, and obviously, you know, I was small, but I could get away with it in my under 12s, under 14s. We were in South Down representation teams, and then my growth stalled to a certain degree. And you know, I remember going as a 16-year-old to the Down minor trials, and yes, I played really, really well, but I was just small. And 16, 17, 18, I wasn't picked, and despite being at trials, I wasn't picked because the size thing and the bit of strength was an issue. And you know, it was missing out. A lot of my friends and the teams I was on, they won a '99 minor team. They won an All Ireland, and I missed out on that. And that, I suppose, to a certain degree, that scarred me in that I seen all my friends celebrating and all the things they would have went to afterward, and I was at none of them, and some of them were my best friends, and it's hard to take, you know. And I nearly geared myself towards making sure that would never happen to me again. That if there's an All Ireland winning team that I could possibly own, I want to be on it. And that's what drove me. That hurt drove me. That's what I was always scared of. I was always scared of failing, and not getting on the team, not getting on the panel, on the back of that experience. So, like, it ended up, I think, even in the 2010 team, on the starting team, I think there was only Benny Coulter and John Clark of that '99 team that were on the starting 15. There was a few other boys in the panel, but on the starting 15, that's the only two guys that started the final. So, you know, it made me the person that I was, so dedicated, so intense. And you know, if that's, you know, I maxed everything I possibly could out of me, my body, my mind, everything. I maxed it out as much as I could. And yes, it didn't, you know, a lot of the teams that we come right up through in the 2000s, we run into a brilliant Armagh team, one of the great teams of those last 20 years. Yes, they mightn't have backed up their one All-Ireland, but they were still a magnificent team of fantastic players and iconic players like Kieran McGeeney, etc. So, and then you had that Tyrone team that were brilliant as well, a brilliant group of players. We just didn't, for whatever reason, we had a good group. We did have a very good group, but you know, defensively we weren't strong enough, and we paid the price in numerous times and occasions. And we had some great results over the years, but the consistency let us down. And there's no doubt about that. Sometimes you got to just say that we didn't have the players at that time. Sorry, we did have the players, but we didn't have enough of them, as opposed to the Armaghs and Tyrones that were dominating that period, you know. But I suppose that's a big regret, and it's a big regret that we couldn't get more players through, and convince more that total commitment was required. Kieran McGeeney was quite famous for his own commitment, and there would have been a lot of us that were similar, very, very committed, as committed as anybody that was in the country, but there wasn't enough of us, you know, committed. And I believe if we had been, we would have got a lot more success.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. And I suppose a kind of question I always ask the former players, like, what was it like to kind of play in the likes of, geez, obviously you had a long and winding career, but I'm always of the opinion, Danny, and I've probably said it to you numerous times, the defensive football obviously came in, and let's say 2010, 2011, the blankets came in again. Donegal brought it back in, unfortunately. Sorry to any Donegal listeners, by the way. But what was it like to play? I know obviously you got the 2010 final, but like, it was nice attacking football, Danny. No real blankets, and just probably enjoyable times to play football in the likes of 08, 09, 07, and the early noughties, I suppose, Danny.
It was brilliant, you know, to play that game. To play that, it was a simple enough game. Tactically, it changed. Yes, tactics would have changed a lot over the years. Like, the Armagh had a very, very straightforward plan, and that very straightforward plan involved the boys get the ball out of the fence to the wings, and then that long diagonal pass to McDonald, to Clark, who would have been moving, rather than moving out towards the ball, they were moving across the field to the ball, and that paid that won them in All Ireland in 03. They could have won another one, or sorry, in 02, in 03 they could have won another one, a back to back like that. You wouldn't have heard the end of that in Armagh. And but then you had Tyrone there, who different style, brilliant forward line that were, that were based on a lot of hard work from the half forward line, and then you had the guys inside, O'Neill, Canavan, Mulligan, unbelievable forward line Tyrone had. So, it was a purist. It was a lot more of a pure game. And even when you went out of Ulster, if you thought Ulster was negative, that you went down the country into Leinster, Connacht, and Munster, it was a very free game, free for all, so to speak, and you went out and it was a pure game. It's not that the change when it came all of a sudden with Donegal in 2011, but even in 2012 Donegal were a different animal. In that they weren't as defensive, obviously, as they were in 2011. They were just so fit and so mobile. And I actually got a pretty big injury 2 weeks before the 2012 Ulster final that we made, and unfortunately, it sort of affected me for the rest of my inter-county career. I had a double hernia and double adductor tear, and I had to go and get the operation. But I got the operation at the end of the year, but I couldn't do anything 2 weeks before. But I came on in that game, and yes, I wasn't, I couldn't get up really to half pace. But even then, you could just see how the game had changed, where Donegal were so mobile. The players that were running from deep, when they went, they all went, and they went with such intensity and such vigour that they nearly scored almostly with every attack, and they were so efficient. So it most certainly changed, but I'm glad I played when I did. But in saying that, now I think I would have, because I played half forward, I would have adapted. And I think most players, you say, well, such and such wouldn't survive in the game today, which I don't agree with, because you are a player of the time rather than the other way around. I think you can adapt to the time. Good players will always adapt to the time, and I think even now with possession football, with the quarterbacking that's played now, I think I would have adapted fine. I still would have loved to play at that level in this time. The freedom that you get now on the ball is a lot more, so I suppose you can dictate the play a lot more. In the positions that I played. Would I like to play inside, which I played inside at times as well? No, certainly not. I think if you're playing inside in the full forward line now, it's it really is a vocation, because you might get the ball, you mightn't get the ball the whole of a half or a whole of a game, and it's very, very frustrating. So the game has changed. Yeah, it's game is game. The game can still be brilliant. You can still get brilliant games, but it's certainly down to how a team approaches the game. I'm a purist. I think you can mix it very, very well and very effectively now, like Dublin do. They're prepared to mix it every way, and I think that needs to be the template if teams are going to compete with Dublin. They need to see Dublin, how they play, and upskill the players. No matter how long it takes, just upskill them, and give them a wee bit of a license, not overcoach them. Give them a wee bit of license to do something extraordinary,
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, guys, this podcast is sponsored by OrgaRetrowear.com. Check the website out for all your retro gear needs and wants. And I suppose, Danny, touching on the 2020 or 2010 All-Ireland final, not the 2020, you're long retired at this stage, but the 2010 All-Ireland final, Danny, I was at that semi-final, I was at the finals myself as well, and two fantastic games of football. Great times for Ulster football, seeing an Ulster team in the final. Is it a fantastic team that year, Danny? Benny Quilter playing, Marty Clark just pulling the strings, playing unbelievable football, and it's a pity he didn't get more of his career, even if you want to touch on him in this question. But what was it like to kind of be like that? What was that like? What was that year like, Danny, and to reach the Holy Grail and unfortunately get bet by a very good Cork team?
Yeah, I suppose it was a wonderful year. It was only a wonderful year in many ways from a sporting perspective, and I suppose at that time we were building a team. We had a couple of under-21 teams that went to a couple of All-Ireland finals in 04, I think in 08. And we had players coming back off that. We had a lot of experience players on the panel from the 99 minor winning team. So it wasn't as if it came out of nowhere per se. There is a school of thought there that we sort of came out of nowhere and we had a lot of momentum and stuff like that. But in 08 we had beaten Tyrone, who went on to win an All-Ireland. We beat them in a replay in Uri after extra time. And of all the games, even 2010 and all those prior to it, 2008 would still rank there among the best that I've ever experienced, because you had a Saturday evening match, replay, extra time, first round game. Stakes were very high, and a packed stadium, 22,000 people in Uri. So it was a wonderful occasion, and the Tyrone players that I know would always go back to that game and saying that's one that they felt that they could have won. We deservedly won it, but after that, Tyrone decided, right, we're going to double down here and we're going to win this All-Ireland, which they did, and they done it in style. We had the potential on any given day to beat anybody. Unfortunately, we lacked the consistency, and that's the big thing. That's the big regret that I would have. Even, I had great managers. I was very lucky to have great managers and great coaches that were over us, but I'm sure it was very frustrating for them. Why we weren't consistent, and maybe why we weren't consistent because we weren't good enough, is one element. But the other side of it, I think we really lacked that free kicking ability. So for Armagh, for example, the semi-final in 08, they beat us by 3 or 4 points. But, we lost Liam Doyle early on with injury, cruciate, and Liam was our free kick taker and one of our playmakers. Had we had Marty, for example, that we had in 2010, we could have sneaked through that game. It doesn't matter how you sneak through a game. Some games are going to be difficult, and you're not going to have the atmosphere and the difficulty of that first round championship game, but you need your free kick takers, and we just didn't have that. We didn't have a Marty, and the difference between that and 2010 is we had a couple of scares on the road in 2010, but having that free kick specialist there who could offer you that 4 or 5 guaranteed points a game was the difference, and that's how small it is. Now a guy come in, Callum King, at midfield. We had struggled for a long time around that middle of field area, and Callum brought us something different, strength and power and that ability to compete there. And as a half forward, that gave me the opportunity to win more break ball. It gave me the opportunity to get on the ball a lot, because when you're not being read out at midfield, then that gives you more opportunities in the half forward line. Marty, again, it was another forward member of the forward line there that the other team had to really look after and really mind. So again, it freed up me and Benny to a certain extent, and it wasn't just about, I suppose, maybe looking after 1 or 2 players in the down forward line. Other players come into play like Mark Poland, Paul McComiskey. We had a really, really good forward line, and that's what it came down to. It just came together, and in 2011 we had a really good National League. We got to the semi-finals. Believe it or not, we were doing extremely well. Why I suppose we didn't get long enough was Marty decided that he had unfinished business in Australia, and unfortunately for us it was a big loss, and you missed them 4 or 5 points a game, those guaranteed free kicks that you need to be popping over even when you're on bad days. It was wonderful why we had him, but we certainly missed him when he wasn't there, and unfortunately players like Marty, you don't get around that often, and unfortunately we had him for 2 years, and it's just a pity we didn't have him for longer, because he was such a good fella, such a good player, and he really gave us something different, and 20 years ago we could have kept a player like that at home, and just the draw of AFL just was too much. And to be fair, he for himself, he probably had unfinished business. But when we go back to the great 91, 94 teams, you had Greg Blaney there, who's one of the, if not the best down player to ever wear a jersey. So, you know, it's just those one or two key positions, and I know that there is teams that are out there at the minute that just need to add one or two players there, and they can be, if they believe, right up there to compete. And for Down, we hadn't won an Ulster Championship since 1994. So what we done in 2010 was, why we didn't win the Ulster Championship, what we done was we competed. We started to really compete at that top table, and we done that for a number of years, even in the National League level. We beat Dublin in 2012 in the National League, and we again ended up in the semi-final of a National League. I think you need to be competing at National League level in finals or semi-finals. You need to be in finals of the provincial championships before you make that step. And the big thing from 2010 is we hadn't been used as a team, as a panel, as individual players in closing out a final. We hadn't won the Ulster Championship, so we hadn't closed out or knew how to win a final, and Cork knew how not to lose one, if you know what I mean. And that's not taking anything away from Cork, because Cork won 3 National Leagues during that time, won multiple Ulster Championships, and to be fair, they probably said we deserved our All-Ireland. But from my perspective, when you look at the game, the potential that we had, maybe we should have closed out the game. But to be fair to Cork, they knew then how not to lose one, because they'd been beaten two in successive years, and we probably didn't know how to win one, if that makes sense. So loads of factors come into play. So it just wasn't meant to be. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be, and yeah, but it was a wonderful journey. It was a wonderful journey, and I wouldn't swap it for anything. And at the end of the year, actually, that was on the 17th of September. On the 17th of December, I lost my mum after a very 4-week illness, and you know, that was so much more devastating than anything I've went through or been through or went through to date. So you know, that was devastating. When we talk about football, football is football, but yes, devastating to lose an All-Ireland final. It was life and death for me, but the other side of it is that something like that happens, it gives you a wee bit of perspective. Not in a good way, but listen, it happens. So in a lot of ways, it was a wonderful year personally. In a lot of other ways, it was the worst year of my life. So you've got both sides there. So yeah, it's just the way it is. I suppose that's life, and you got to roll with the punches.
Yeah, definitely. I could fully go with that. I'd something similar, but I didn't get to an All-Ireland final in 2015. But 2015 was a good year. I'm sure my mum unfortunately passed away herself. It's the worst feeling in the world, unfortunately, Danny. And
that's terrible. That's
yeah,
terrible.
yeah.
And it can leave, and you know, I suppose it's something that you're not taught. We can taught how to toe tap a ball, kick a ball over the bar. You're trained how to do different things, and you know, and one thing you're not taught emotionally anyway, and something that you're not prepared for is how to deal with grief, and something I just didn't deal with. I couldn't deal with it, and wasn't very good at dealing with it, and you know, and you think that you're doing right by throwing yourself into football and stuff like that, but yeah, it can be very, very difficult to deal with that, and yeah, but from my mum's point of view, there's one thing that I am very thankful. She got to have that wonderful year that we had. Even, you know, the old people talk about the All-Star Awards and stuff like that, and they would maybe say that they don't really matter and stuff, but by God, they mattered to my mother, you know what I mean, more than me, because it was nearly for her, because the effort she put in behind the scenes, and you know, the dark days, and trying to lift you up after defeat, and washing your gear, and making sure your food's on the table, and running us when we were younger over the training, and making sure that we were fit and healthy. You know, those things that all mothers, I'm sure yours done the same. So those type of, for her, it was fantastic that she got that. And that we had that year, because she knew how much it meant to me, and much it meant to a lot of us, a lot of my teammates, and I have a lot of great friends that are, and she understood, and we had great times after matches. We went out for drinks and beers and stuff after, you know, after every championship match, and in the later years when I was getting older, mum and dad would have, you know, I nearly would have went out with them after the matches as well, and I would have went with the boys and all the rest of it, and they would have there had a couple of drinks. It was wonderful, really wonderful time. So for that, I'm very thankful. So yeah, 20 times a mixed bag.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I suppose, kind of touching on that as well, Danny, obviously 2011, 2012, the seasons that rolled in after the 2010 All-Ireland final, how did you manage kind of like dealing with the grief of your mom and playing football? Because obviously playing with Down, you're Division 2, Division 1 most years, you know, you're getting the ladder end of the championship. So how did you find juggling that? Because I know myself personally, obviously Mother's Day gone in there, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I don't know about you. So, you know, it can be hard juggling that kind of crack.
I didn't manage it. I didn't juggle it right, and you know, I suppose it was difficult at home, because it's not just me that's dealing with it. It's my father, it's my brothers, my sister. You know, we had a big family unit. It's my mummy's wider family, her sisters and her brothers, that are all struggling with it. And it's such a short illness, cancer, 4 weeks, and you just got somebody ripped out. So I dealt with. I didn't know how to deal with. Truth be told, I was really struggling. I was throwing myself into the football, and I was nearly willing myself and willing my body on to an extent where you're pushing that hard to distract yourself from dealing with stuff that you don't want to deal with, that my body started to break down. I got very frustrated and angry, and you know, and when you're in that mindset, everything seems to be a big deal, everything seems to be going wrong, and it's very difficult to pull your way out. And when you don't know, maybe people can see it on you, but you can't see it, if you know what I mean. And you know, I was lucky to have a very supportive girlfriend and fiance and now wife, and she, you know, I suppose her along with her family and my own family, you know, just really helped you through that. And but it's something that you have to do yourself, and I suppose my football was the outlet, and when the outlet is going wrong, that's very difficult to deal with, and dealing with everything, getting injured, things not going right on the football field. And I would have struggled losing with loss anyway. I would have struggled with defeat and personal performance, but very critical of myself anyway. And when you add all those things into the mix, I was building a house as well, and you know, I've job there that can be quite stressful. It's just overwhelming. And yeah, it was almost like I went through a number of those years drunk, where I can't actually remember a lot of what I was doing or what I was saying or what I was thinking or the anger, you know. And I suppose everybody treats it different. Some people turn to drink and other substances. Mine was football, but just wasn't working out. I was starting to get injured and stuff like that, and the more I pushed, the more frustrated I got. And I'm sure the physios, and I'm sure even the Down management at the time, were getting a bit frustrated with me, because I was so angry and so negative, you know, at times. And you know, I don't disagree with that analogy. I would have been probably quite wicked then. I would have got started to get very, very wicked at that time. You know, wouldn't have took very much to set me off, you know, even the club training. And yeah, it was my approach to things wasn't healthy. But again, that's in hindsight. I would do it all different.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to kind of get your perspective on the whole thing. And I suppose, Danny, like kind of pushing on from them years as well, like, and obviously like after 2010, maybe would you describe that maybe after 2010, maybe 13, 14, still very strong Down teams? Was it a bit of a slump after that, Danny, after the 2010 final? Or
2011 we competed,
yeah,
you know, reasonably well. You know, there was other teams starting to come through. Mayo were strong. We were still having very, very good National League runs, very good National League results. We still, you know, were playing really, really well at times. the management team was still, James McCartan was a player I just was iconic for me. He was a player I mirrored my own game on because he's small in stature, and his heart and his guts and his ability. James McCartan was a hero for me. So I suppose he's decided to change things up in 2012, where Paddy Talley and Brian McIver moved on, and Aidan O'Rourke came in, and Aidan O'Rourke was actually brilliant. Aidan O'Rourke, I have to say, we were all sorry to lose Paddy Talley and Brian McIver. We definitely were, but you can't say that Aidan O'Rourke wasn't brilliant. Aidan O'Rourke was brilliant, and tactically and everything else, I thought he was super. To be honest, but Aidan, I suppose, had ambitions to be a manager in his own right, and rightly so. And he was only with us a year, and then it changed again. And then, for whatever reason, while we got some results, a lot of the players that would have been close to the 15 and the wider panel players probably weren't as strong as what we had. And you're as strong as your panel. And Dublin would prove that year in, year out, where their in-house games are much more competitive than their actual championship games. And you could definitely see that, the players that were leaving, for whatever reason, they would have been, maybe weren't getting a chance, and they were experienced players, or felt that the risk or the reward versus the commitment just wasn't worth it anymore. And I would still, I suppose, players would have held this, and I would contend that, our panel, our team that took us there in 2010, it was probably broken up too early. And I would say that, we should have had a much more flexible approach to the players on that panel. And I think if we had managed a lot of the players a lot better, we could have maybe arrested that decline that happened from 2013-14 onwards. We could have arrested that, and made even a new management team that came in would have made it a wee bit more seamless, where you could have put a backroom team in place that either would have taken over, or would have probably been kept on, so that the management through was much more seamless. So I think mistakes were made, certainly. And when you look at even Dublin there, how they managed that Jim Gavin to Desi Farrell, what a perfect way to manage a new manager at the very top. So I don't understand why other counties can't get a pathway. They seem to be putting in pathways for players, but I don't understand how you can't have a pathway in management where you have a pretty seamless team to go forward. So I suppose if I was being really critical, I would say that the team was being broken up far, far too quickly, and there wasn't that seamlessness with regards to management as well. There seems to be there was a lot of chopping and changing, and yeah, that would be my I suppose, looking on, that would be my opinion. So whether right or wrong, I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose even kind of looking into it as well, 2014 came knocking, and I think you said it to me before, you didn't officially retire. The manager kind of in no uncertain terms kind of said, right, Danny, you weren't part of the setup, or what was the situation, Danny?
Yeah, at that time I was so hurt by it. At that time I was so hurt because you're going through a process where you're actually maybe I was struggling even on a day-to-day basis with grief, with injuries, frustrations, building a house, work, and stuff like that. But you never really want to give up the county side of it. You never really want to do that. And at the end of October 2013, I said to myself, you really need to get your life in a bit of order, as in you need to start to prioritize what's, just to get back into a space where you're positive, you're enthusiastic, that you're rested physically and mentally. So I wanted to go away and do a bit of work on myself to get physically and mentally right. And hopefully when you do that, when you get into a good space playing and training at club level, then that would obviously lend itself to being strong at county level. And I didn't want to be one of these players that were living off my name, because I wanted to play on the first 15, but I didn't want to be there on the panel. And I've seen it on too many panels over the years with us, people that were just seeing out their time then. I didn't want that. I really didn't. I wanted to really justify my place, because I've always felt that I had to justify it. So I suppose I decided that I didn't really want to come back for the pre-season, because I wanted to get myself a bit of rest, into a good headspace, get a good physical space. And I told the doctor as well, the county doctor at the time, that I wanted to do that as well as James. Obviously, James had asked lads then and had put it out to a couple of the players, and the players had said to me in January, would you come back in now? We're thinking, but at that time, to be honest, I hadn't had any time with the club, my own club. I hadn't justified to myself nearly that I was at that level to go back in, that I was playing well enough to go back in, and not to go back into the panel. Anybody can do that, just go back into the team. So I still wanted I was buying a wee bit more time. I'd done a couple of interviews actually with the Irish News that more or less said that, and I think I'm almost sure that management made the decision, right, well, other players have went to you maybe on the back of what they've asked other players, senior players, to do. You've been asked to come back, and it's nearly like you're dictating it, but that genuinely wasn't the case. And James announced my retirement to reporters after a National League game one day, and it took me surprise, because I actually hadn't made that decision at that time, and it hurt. It actually did hurt, because I suppose again, James was an icon, and I had worked so hard for Down. I had went to a lot of stuff that nobody would go to, and I just felt betrayed a wee bit. And but listen, I learned that county football will eat you up and spit you out, and within that context, you have to accept that you're only probably as good as your last game. The context within which you sign up to county football and all the rest of it is that loyalty to a certain extent doesn't exist. So you're as good as what you take to the table, and you've got to accept that. You've got to accept that. It's like the Formula 1 drivers when they take their life in their hands by driving at den speeds. You could crash, you could hit a wall, you could die. In the county scenario, you could crash, you could get a big injury, and you're on your own. And when you're out, you're out. So, there's nobody gonna come and thank you. You're not going to get testimonials, or you're not going to be treated like some kind of king. It doesn't happen like that. So I suppose my disappointment was that I never got to, I suppose, finish as I wanted to. But then that has happened to so many All-County players, and I've made my peace with that. It's not the way I wanted at the time, and it's not how I felt at the time. It was very bitter. But that's the way it ended up, and I suppose that's the way it was.
Yeah, and I suppose, Danny, with the phrase kind of when it comes to county football, would the phrase kind of eaten bread soon forgotten kind of ring any bells? Because obviously, like looking in from the outside, like obviously you led Down to 2010 All-Ireland final, really, with you and Benny and Marty. You got an All-Star for them. It was handled very badly at the end of it, by the sounds of it. So, Danny, it would like that nearly pissed me off, and I'm not even involved in the situation.
Listen, I suppose, yeah, the All-Star is one thing, but it's not even about that. I had some like championship matches and National League games even after that in 2011, 2012, and I've been very, very critical of myself, and I was playing well, my form was good. Was I the same player that I was? Probably. Like anything in time, but I still felt that I still would have been one of the best options, or I could have adapted to play even in halfbacks or anywhere. I still felt I would have had something, and given time, I would have got over that major injury that I had. Because I started even in 2014, I was playing well at club level, well enough to say that I could actually do a job at county level. But that took a wee bit of trust on all sides. It would have taken a wee bit of trust from me to adapt to a new role. It would have taken a wee bit of trust from management, and a wee bit of communication. And I just don't think that was there. I suppose in 2010 I was nominated for along with Bernard Brogan and Michael Sees as Player of the Year, and to go from there to 4 years later, it just was such a cliff edge fall. I just, and some of it, self-inflicted, yes, but some of it not. I just felt it just wasn't the way I wanted to end it, and it was nearly like it mirrored life for me at that time as well. It was cliff edge stuff. Like I was just spiraling, I would say, even in mindset. So to much more of a negative type of personality, and a critical one at that. So yeah, it was an angry time for me. It was a difficult time for me, and something that left the scars. But then that's no different than a lot of county players out there that, I was interested. I'm not sure which one of the Kilkenny players went to meet Brian Cody. I had multiple All-Stars, multiple All-Irelands, and he wanted to know if he had a place in the panel anymore, and they didn't even get to ordering tea, where Brian Cody was quite straight with him, saying, listen, I don't know, I can't make any promises, and they didn't even get to ordering tea. So Cian McGinney again at the end, did he bow out the way he wanted to? Probably not. And this guy, I admire hugely in Cian McGinney. I think he's a great guy, great footballer, iconic player. And did he bow out the way he wanted to? Probably not either. And was it fair? Absolutely not. But that's life. Life isn't fair, and you got to accept that. And that's more often than not, you don't always get what you deserve. And listen, that's just the way it was. Yes, was I angry? Of course. Would I be angry? Of course. But listen, I'd be a lot angrier if it was one of my kids or something like that. There's much bigger things in life now, thanks be to God.
Yeah, and like just on a side note, have you spoke to James McCartan much since the whole thing?
Absolutely, yeah.
And
have we got into the conversation, the deep conversations about what whose fault and what happened? Is no. For James, how he was as a player, unbelievable. When he came in as a manager, did he make us a better team? Absolutely did. Am I thankful to him? Absolutely am. I've still great time for him, and McCartan's or Sam Almus were down football and always will be. And James, will always be a hero. Will always be a hero, and I'm not just saying that. But we all meet each other in life, and I disagree in some of the things that happen. But listen, much more important things in life than well, is there? Sometimes even have that struggle with myself. It's a very important thing in my life, and I'm sure it is in his life as well. But listen, it's gone. There's nothing I can do about it now, and that's the decision that's made. I'm not saying that I wasn't at fault. I know, even from a physio point of view, we had really good physios over the years, and did I piss them off? Absolutely. But did I do what I was told? Absolutely not. At times, would often seen an physio and stuff like that. So, did I always do the right thing either? No. So, there's blame on all sides. But listen, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely, Danny. Absolutely. And I suppose, reflecting on all that, Danny, who would have been the best player you played with against over the years?
Oh, best player. I think the best player, it's very difficult because, I played with a lot of wonderful players, great players. Benny, obviously, uh, you know, Benny could do extraordinary things at extraordinary times, and Benny was as close to the one of the most natural finishers and players that I've played along with. I always felt I needed to really work for 70 minutes to get recognition. I really needed to bust myself to get recognition. Benny didn't, and that's the mark of his
Yeah.
brilliance. Benny could have been absolutely anonymous or rubbish for 60 minutes, and in 10 minutes he would be the man. And that's the beauty of his ability, his skill. He pulled us out of more holes as well. With getting goals, he had a fantastic goal ratio as well to games. For me, Benny was, you know, probably one of the best that I had the pleasure of working with. Marty Clark was the time that he was with us was superb, and without Marty, we wouldn't have got to the 2010 All Ireland final, without him, because he offered us that that brilliance, that bit of that brilliance that we needed at the right time, and he brought it all together nearly. It was the last wee bit. But listen, all the lads on that 2010 team and the wider panel, there was great lads in the wider panel. Ronnie Saxon, Ronnie Morda, good friends of mine. Mark Poland, who was came into that team. Paul McComiskey, super players. Dee Rafferty, what a player Dee was as well. And Conor Garvey, Daggy Rooney, guys that maybe you wouldn't have seen. But everyone, and Brandy McVeigh, that's great character as well, fantastic character. And again, if there was people that lifted the positivity and spirits in the room, it was certainly Brandy. And then you get guys that came in, the Kevin McKiernans and stuff, that have went on to captain down, great lads. But I have to say I was very fortunate in that the lads that I played with, each and every one of them were fantastic, and that thanks be to God, you would always hope that you would have friends there that you could always go back at the club level. Listen, I played with and against some super players, but I made some really really good friends at Railway Cup level. Hub Hughes, McMahon lads, all good lads, and when you play against them, of course, you go out there and you hate them and you want to beat them. But even the Armagh guys, some of the guys there, I would still have fierce time for Enda McNulty, Justin McNulty, guys like that, really good guys. Paul McGrain, Kieran McGinney, obviously. Kieran McGinney again. I would look at him in the same way I look at James McCartan and Mickey Linden, for example, and Greg Brady, Greg McCartan. But Kieran McGinney is a guy I hugely admire, and the Armagh team at the minute, they're going through a bit of a transition. They've got into the first division, and I'm so delighted for him as well. Because Kieran puts a lot into the game, puts a lot into his players, and guys like that, when you meet them, you can always say that you played against them, and you have to be very thankful. I'm so thankful for the career and the time that I had, John. That's the truth, and I made a lot of good friends out of it, and I've done very very well out of it in a lot of ways. So, but again, when you reflect on all that, the players that you played against as well, some of the Gooch, Kieran Donaghy, some of the best players to have played the game, and some of those Dublin players, Paul Flynn, stuff that were coming as I was leaving, they were coming, and Paul Flynn again is a guy that changed the game to a certain extent. He changed, like, he was kicking 3 or 4 points a game, is again offering so much more, and you forget a man, the 5 All-Irelands, or 5 All-Stars, and has he got 5 All-Irelands? He probably does. So again, I've been extremely lucky to have lived that county career for so long, and to get where I've got. So yeah, but again, it's hard to put it down. Every different player brought
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Danny Hughes, thanks a million for joining me on the JMac podcast. And of course, this podcast is sponsored by OrgaRetro.com. Check the website for all your retro gear needs. Danny, it's always a pleasure. I always have great joy listening to you, and you're a top man. So thanks a million for joining me on the JMac podcast.
Thanks. Take care of yourself. Bye.
Cheers, my man. Thank you.